Hi, it's Doug. You might know that I live in the US state of California. Now, California is a big state, and not just in terms of the land size. There's 37 million people living here. That's more people than any other state in the United States. And yet, what's surprising, given that it's the most populated state in America, is that California actually doesn't have a lot of fresh water. There aren't a lot of lakes, there aren't a lot of rivers, there aren't that many aquifers. California is a pretty dry state. Parts of it are even desert. So it's not unusual, at least in some parts of California, for there to be little rain for months on end. For Californians who live in those driest parts of the state, sometimes things can even get scary. My friend Pat tells a true story that one day in 2015, her brother went to turn on his faucet, and nothing came out. The town he lives in sits on an aquifer. There's normally some groundwater down there, but the aquifer had run dry. Now, at first, that might just seem like it would be kind of weird or maybe a slight inconvenience. Oh man, I can't shower this morning. But think about it. What if this lack of water from his faucet was something that lasted for days? Remember, people can only live about 3 days without water. If you ran out of water on a Monday, by Wednesday, you could be dead. What should Pat's brother do in a situation like this? Just pack his bags and move? He can't do that. He's got a home there. It's where he lives. Surely there's some way to solve a problem like this. If this were your town, what would you do? I'll point out something that makes things even more frustrating for Pat's brother. Here's California, and here is the largest body of water on Earth, the Pacific Ocean. It's right there. Now, that just seems crazy. How could you run out of water if you live in California? But remember, ocean water is salt water. You can't drink salt water, and it turns out that getting the salt out of the water is really hard to do and also incredibly expensive. Now, I guess the town could buy tons of bottled water and then have it delivered to everyone's homes. But the town has thousands of people. They couldn't do that forever. What the town really needs is for its aquifer to be full again. In other words, the key to all this is going to be rain. Rain is what fills aquifers up to begin with. It's the reason why aquifers have water in them. And by the way, not having enough rain isn't just a problem that can happen in California. There are other places in the world that have dry climates, places where people run into similar problems, like Australia, the Middle East, parts of India. And yet, lots of other places on Earth don't have these problems. Many places get plenty of rain. Rain is a pretty simple thing, right? It's just drops of water that fall from the sky, specifically from clouds. Isn't there something we could do to make it rain a little more in the drier places, like where Pat's brother lives? To figure something like this out, really the question we need to ask ourselves is, what makes it rain in the first place? How does water get up into the clouds? And why does it fall out of them? So what do you think? How does rain get up into clouds? Well, this is what I drew. You can see here, I've got the ocean down here. Maybe you drew a lake or a pond or a puddle. As long as you have any water on the ground, that's good. And I've got arrows going upwards where I've written evaporation. Now, maybe you didn't write that on your drawing. That's fine. But I'm guessing you've heard of this idea before. Evaporation is the name for the process when water goes from being a liquid to a gas. Now, here's maybe the most familiar example of evaporation. It's a boiling pot of water on a stove. The heat of the stove is causing water to be converted from its liquid phase in the pot to its gas phase above. You could call this stuff up here water gas. Scientists and most people tend to call it by an older name, water vapor. So I'll call it that too. But even if the water isn't boiling, For example, this puddle of water on the ground. As long as there's some heat around, like the heat of the sun's rays hitting this puddle, some of that water is still turning into water vapor. Watch as this video is sped up. See how the liquid water evaporates? It didn't disappear. It just became water vapor. It's going into the air. This is surprising, but you can see it for yourself right at home. Like, check out this other example. This is a glass of water left sitting out in a warm room. Let's go ahead and mark where the water level's at. And now watch as the video gets sped up. Well, are you seeing that? The water level's going down. If you watch again, you can even see something escaping the glass. That's liquid water as it's becoming water vapor. So as long as there's some heat around, some liquid water will evaporate. It will turn into water vapor and rise up into the air. So that's why I've got the sun and evaporation drawn on here. The heat of the sun alone is enough to cause some of the water in puddles, in lakes, in rivers, and the ocean to evaporate and enter the air around us. That's evaporation. Now, it might be tempting to think that maybe clouds are made of water vapor that's risen up into the atmosphere. After all, clouds seem to float up there in the Earth's atmosphere. And that's what you'd expect a gas to do, float around up there in the air above us. But it's possible to actually jump through a cloud and find out exactly what it's made of. That's what these skydivers are about to do. Watch. Right there, you notice that? Right there. Clouds, including rain clouds, are actually made of tiny droplets of liquid water. Why would there be liquid water up there? Well, it would seem that water vapor, that's water in its gas form, rises up into the air around us and then somehow gets converted from a gas back into liquid water. What might cause water in its gas form to start forming droplets of liquid water? You don't have to go up to the clouds to collect clues. You can find evidence right here in your everyday life, right here on Earth's surface. Have you ever noticed that droplets of water formed on something? In today's activity, you're going to figure out what makes it rain, and you'll do that by doing some experiments. Now, it's tough to experiment with something as big as a rainstorm. You can't fit a rain cloud or an ocean of water in your room. So rather than sending you up into the clouds to figure out what's going on, we're going to make a model. Maybe you think of a model as a miniature version of something that looks like the real thing. Like a model airplane looks like a real plane. But in science, people often make models that don't necessarily look like the real thing. Instead, they act like the real thing. That's the kind of model you're going to make today. Let's walk through what your model will look like. You'll have a small cup of water to provide water vapor. That's going to be your ocean. It's a small ocean, but that's fine. Then you'll have a clear plastic cup you'll put over that. That's going to be your sky, the atmosphere, the place where clouds form. Now remember, a rain cloud is just a bunch of tiny water drops. Those drops join together to make big drops that fall as rain. So your goal is to get water vapor to rise up from the ocean, that's the water in this cup, and turn into a cloud in the sky. Or in other words, you want a bunch of water drops to form on the clear cup. Those tiny water drops will look like fog or rain on the clear cup. Can you figure out how to make the most rain in the sky? See if you can. I'll walk you through the setup step by step.